When I imagined moving to Germany, I worried about the big things. Would I get my residence permit? Would I find an apartment? Could I earn enough money to stay here? Would I be able to function with my very limited German? What I didn't anticipate was standing in front of a German washing machine, staring at approximately 17 settings, and feeling as though I had never washed an article of clothing in my life. Moving abroad has a strange way of doing that to you. You can be an educated, capable adult who has worked for decades, supported herself, and handled major life decisions, and then a grocery store checkout line, a bus detour, or an unfamiliar appliance can reduce you to, I don't know what I'm doing. Moving to Germany has given me experiences I'm grateful for. It has also challenged me in ways that I did not expect, in small ways and not small ways. So today I would like to talk about 5 things I genuinely wasn't prepared for when I moved to Germany, not as a travel expert, but as a woman in her 50s trying to build an ordinary life in a new country. If you have ever moved somewhere new and wondered why everyone else seemed to understand the rules except you, you are my people. Everyday tasks became major accomplishments. The first thing I wasn't prepared for was how much mental energy ordinary life would require. In the United States, I could walk into a grocery store, recognize the products, and understand the checkout process without thinking about it. In Germany, I might pick up an item and stare at the label, trying to determine exactly what it is in German, and more importantly, what I'm supposed to do with it. Is this already cooked? Does it go in the microwave? Is this ham? Or have I accidentally purchased something that only resembles ham? Then there are the appliances, like I mentioned, the washing machines and microwaves and heating systems can all seem to have their own personalities, and none of them are particularly interested in explaining themselves to me in English. Public transportation is wonderful when you understand it. When a route changes, a bus stop moves, or an announcement at the train station is made entirely in German, it becomes a small test of character and patience. Even making a phone call can feel like an event requiring advanced preparation, written notes, and possibly emotional support. None of these situations is catastrophic, but when you encounter several of them in the same day, they create a kind of mental exhaustion. You are constantly translating, interpreting, and wondering whether you have misunderstood something important. A successful day may not look very impressive from the outside. Maybe I found the correct bus or train, bought what I actually intended to buy, and completed an administrative appointment without accidentally agreeing to something mysterious. But internally, I'm thinking, look at me, I'm thriving. I learned something new today. Moving abroad taught me that independence sometimes looks remarkably similar to successfully operating a washing machine in another language. Finding a home is different from finding accommodation. The second thing I wasn't prepared for was how difficult it would be to find a place that felt like home. I knew Germany had a competitive housing market before I left Phoenix. I did not fully understand what that would mean emotionally, particularly. You send messages, you gather documents, you explain your income, you check whether registration is possible, you examine transportation because you don't have a car, you investigate the internet because you work online, and then you wait. Sometimes you receive a rejection. Sometimes you receive no answer at all. Sometimes an apartment looks promising until you realize that the nearest practical grocery store requires a bus, a train, and the determination of an Olympic athlete. My needs didn't seem extravagant. I wanted somewhere quiet, clean, and safe, with reliable internet, access to public transportation, and shops I could reach without a car. A little greenery would be nice. Water nearby would be even better. And I wanted to be able to sleep without hearing someone's entire social life through the wall. But when you are living in temporary apartments, you never completely settle, in my mind. You unpack, but not all the way. You buy what you need, but hesitate before buying anything that would be difficult to move. Part of you is always thinking about the next address, the next city. I wasn't merely looking for a roof and a bed. I was looking for the place where my nervous system could finally believe you live here now. You can exhale now. That has been much harder to find than I expected. The third surprise was food. Germany has amazing bakeries. I have developed a great appreciation for being able to walk into a bakery and find fresh bread almost everywhere. But enjoying German bakeries does not mean I stopped missing familiar American food. Sometimes I don't want a cultural experience. Sometimes I want something simple, predictable, and recognizable. I want to enter a store, immediately understand what everything is, and find the exact version of a product I already know I like. Instead, I have occasionally stood in front of an entire aisle of food, unable to locate the one ordinary thing I wanted. And German food can be quite salty to me, very salty. There have been meals that made me wonder whether the chef was preserving them for a difficult winter. Food is emotional in ways we don't always recognize. It represents routine, familiarity, and home. When everything else in your life is unfamiliar, even finding the right sandwich can feel strangely important. I used to think homesickness would mean missing a city or family or a house, but sometimes homesickness is simply wanting the food you ate when you didn't have to think so hard about feeding yourself. The fourth thing I wasn't prepared for was how different it would feel to come home to an apartment where absolutely no one was waiting for me. I knew I would be moving solo, but knowing something intellectually and experiencing it every evening are not the same thing. I work online, so I can spend much of the day talking to students around the world. I may have several warm, interesting, positive conversations, and then the final lesson of the day ends. I close the laptop, the apartment becomes quiet, there's no family member in the other room, there's no friend stopping by, and there isn't even a pet demanding food or behaving as though my sole purpose in life is to open a can. I love cats and dogs, and I wasn't prepared for how much I would miss simply having an animal nearby. A pet changes the feeling of a home. There's another little life in the room. There's a reason to get up early. A familiar sound in the hallway and someone who notices when you return. Cats may pretend not to care, but they usually keep track of where you are. Living in temporary accommodations has made getting a pet impractical. I don't yet have the permanent apartment or stability I would need to make that commitment responsibly. But that doesn't mean I don't feel the absence. And after losing my mother last year, moving abroad, and living alone, I think I wanted something beside me, something that could make a temporary apartment feel less temporary. I wasn't expecting a pet to solve grief or loneliness. I simply wasn't prepared prepared for how much comfort can come from another living creature sharing your ordinary day. Sometimes independence feels empowering. Sometimes it feels like eating dinner in a quiet apartment and wishing a cat were staring at you judgmentally from across the room. The fifth thing I wasn't prepared for was how stressful it could feel not to know the system. I thoroughly prepared before leaving the USA, but Germany is known for rules, procedures, and documentation. There are advantages to that, don't get me wrong. Systems create order and predictability, but a system only feels predictable when you understand it. When you don't speak the language fluently, a letter in the mail can cause your heart rate to rise before you have even translated the first sentence. Is this informational? Is it a request? Is there a deadline? Have I done something wrong? And sometimes the answer to a very reasonable question seems to be, that is not how it is done. I would think, I understand that it isn't normally done that way, but could we perhaps consider doing it this way because it would solve the problem? Germany's response, at least occasionally, seemed to be, no, nine. I had to learn that my frustration did not necessarily mean someone was being unkind. I was accustomed to a culture where people often look for exceptions or improvise a solution. German systems value consistency, and that difference can feel inflexible when you are the person whose situation doesn't fit neatly into the available box. Dealing with housing, insurance, medical appointments, and immigration paperwork while still learning the language sometimes made me feel powerless. But it also forced me to become more resourceful. I learned to translate everything with AI. I prepared questions before appointments. I saved documents I didn't completely understand because I had learned that someone would probably ask for them later. And I kept going, even when I felt embarrassed about needing help. There's a special kind of humility involved in becoming a beginner again in your 50s. There's one more truth underneath all five of these experiences. Part of me imagined that moving abroad would make me feel different, braver, freer, more adventurous, perhaps even less anxious. And sometimes it has. But moving to another country doesn't separate you from your grief, your fears, or your old patterns. You pack those too. Wherever you go, there you are. I arrived in Germany after losing my mother. I was trying to create a new life while still missing the person who had made my old life feel safer. So when I struggled with an apartment and a medical issue or an empty calendar, I wasn't always responding only to that particular problem. Sometimes the frightened part of me was asking, who is going to help me if I can't handle this? Who do I call for advice? Germany didn't magically turn me into a fearless woman, but it has shown me that courage does not necessarily feel fearless. Sometimes courage feels like being anxious and going to the appointment anyway. It feels like getting on the bus when you aren't completely certain where it stops. It feels like sending another apartment application after receiving no response to the last one. It feels like continuing to build a life even when you are still grieving the person you wish you could tell all about this to. Moving to Germany has been exciting, frustrating, lonely, and beautiful and confusing. I have visited places I never imagined I would see. I have built a legal life in another country. I have a residence card. I have worked with students around the world. I have navigated systems that initially felt impossible. And I have learned that starting over does not always look inspiring while you're doing it. Sometimes it looks like paperwork. Sometimes it looks like eating unfamiliar food in a service apartment. Sometimes it looks like missing your family and wishing you had a pet. But little by little, unfamiliar things become familiar. You find the correct train number. You learn which bread you like. You understand another official letter. You begin recognizing the streets around you. And one day you realize that the place where you once felt completely lost has become part of your life. I'm not telling this story because I have mastered living abroad. I'm still in the messy middle. I'm telling it because I haven't. Finding Marcia is about building a new life without pretending that every part of it is easy or that being brave means never feeling frightened. If you have ever moved somewhere new, tell me what you weren't prepared for. And if you are rebuilding your life after loss, specifically change, or simply realizing that your old life no longer fits, subscribe and join me here. We may not have everything figured out. We are never going to figure everything out, but we are still allowed to begin again and to try. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.